Hello. We are the Sons of Morthraken. I'm D.
I'm M.
I'm Jay.
Today we're going to talk about this new Lord of the Rings. What do we call it?
TV series?
No, there's got to be a better word than
Yeah,
that.
let's call it the Amazon Project.
Lord of the Rings Amazon project. Expensive Amazon project.
Second Age. Something.
Yeah, so here's what we know about it so far. We've recently learned that it's going to take place in the Second Age, which started about 1,000 years before the events in the original Lord of the Rings trilogy. We don't know much more of it than that. The Second Age, a lot happens. Predominantly, it's the time of Numenor, which is the, best age of men, some fancy kingdom. It's like Atlantis, essentially. It gets swallowed into the sea. And I don't know, what else do we know about the Second Age?
So it's
Sauron's around.
It's when Sauron, who was the lieutenant to Melkor or Morgoth, I guess he's got multiple names.
He changed his name to Morgoth from Melkor.
Yes.
Who's created Melkor by Iluvatar.
Melkor gets cast down, and Sauron rises to power. And it's really, I think the focus of it will be around the forming of the Rings of Power. The rings that were the 3 that were given to elves, the 9 that were given to men, and how many
and
were
then
given
Sauron's corruption of the rings through the one that would control them and otherwise poison it. So it's kind of like this. This was the best. This was the project that was set in motion until Melkor Morgoth, through his general Sauron, came in and tampered with what Iluvatar's project was.
So
What was Iluvatar's project?
The realm of men and elves and all things are going to be good and great and happy. And then there's orcs.
Sweet. Okay, so is there any hope that this is going to be any good?
yes. Okay, I'll make the case for it. One, the investment in this property is they spent $250 million on the rights alone, just to make it. Amazon's behind it, and it's too big of an investment to fail. They will bring in the best writing teams, the best production crews. This is Amazon's Game of Thrones. Here's where I would say I would be very concerned and skeptical, and that is if they had planned, there had been some talk that this would be based in the years 50, 60 years before the beginning of the Fellowship of the Ring and focus on the life of young Aragorn. I think that would be a problem. I think anytime they're going to get too close to overlapping with what has already been done by Peter Jackson between the time of The Hobbit and through the end of The Lord of the Rings, I think it'd be a problem because it would be the Lord of the Rings, and I'll leave the Hobbit trilogy movie out of it for now, but The Lord of the Rings was so well done, it doesn't need to be redone, and it would be the comparison that is made constantly. I think where they made the right decision is picking an age that has not been touched yet. I mean, it's been lightly discussed or referenced in The Lord of the Rings, but being able to come up with all new characters, for the most part. Sauron will be there, potentially Elrond, Galadriel, some of the elves.
Elrond Hubbard?
Yes, Elrond Hubbard will be in it.
Dietetics, or whatever his book is.
These are the... I won't even do that. Turning off all our Scientology fans right now. So
all 3 of them.
There are dozens of us.
Dozens!
Anyway, I think where they're picking a new place to go, where there's plenty of room for mystery and drama and intrigue, and also, we've talked about this before, high fantasy is in right now. And
but here's the
so
problem.
much room for it to be good.
Here's the problem. They spent $250 million on the rights to use the name Lord of the Rings. And if they choose an age where we don't have any characters that overlap, we don't really have any story, yes, it gives them a fertile ground upon which to sow their wild oats. No, it lets them tell any story they want, but why spend $250 million just for the name Lord of the Rings? It doesn't make any sense to me. And we also know that they've reached an agreement with Peter Jackson and New Line Cinema to use footage from the original trilogy in the show. There has to be some overlap.
I think there will be slight overlap. I'm just saying the time period's not the same. There will be references that go back and forth, right? But to cover the same time period that's already been covered and done so well is what I'm saying would have been a mistake.
I agree with you. I don't understand where this show is going to go and how it's going to be successful. And what do you say?
I think it's going to be absolute dumpster juice, hot summer wet garbage. I think it's gonna fall apart. Here's your conundrum. You have one of the most richly stocked neckbeard properties. And you're going to have just a whole slew of angry neckbeards up in arms about, that's not how you pronounce that. That's not accurate. None of that actually occurred. And then you have people that don't give a shit about nerd properties like Lord of the Rings. And
Wait, hold on, let me pause you. Where do you fit in this?
I'm a normie. I'm just a normal dude. I'm just a normal dude who studied this in college for some reason. So I'm not a neckbeard.
Yeah, you got
despite my robust neckbeard, my lady. I think it's going to be too upsetting of an intellectual property to people that are overly invested in maintaining the religious aspect of it, and then I think normal people don't care. And I don't think they have anywhere to go with this story because we all kind of know what happens, okay? No matter what, they're not going to kill the big bad because the big bad lives on through Hobbit, through Lord of the Rings, to eventually be killed. But it's going to suffer. It's going to suffer from the same problem that...
Damn it, M!
That one was you!
that Valkyrie had with Tom Cruise, where it's like, why would I watch Valkyrie? I know you're not going to blow up Hitler. So what's the point of watching Valkyrie?
The same thing could be said of any movie that's made after a book was written and based on that book. We all know the end of the Lord of the Rings before we ever started watching. And by the way, to your previous argument, well, you hadn't read it.
Twist.
To your previous argument, whether it's Game of Thrones or Lord of the Rings, your offensive term neckbeards, large groups.
We can call them grognards if that feels more organic.
Whatever you're saying,
Incels.
then basically, if there's source material, then
Who
you can't
haven't
make.
we alienated yet?
Yeah,
French people suck.
Yeah, do it all.
If if there's source material, then you're saying that, and the source material has a following, then you're saying you can't make something from it.
But the source material
disagree.
was terribad. The Silmarillion is one of the worst written stories ever made, and it was published, I believe, posthumous. And it was everybody trying to make what...
I think that's pronounced posthumous.
Yeah,
but
posthumous. I was playing Mario Kart when I overheard it. It doesn't... It's not interesting. It's better relegated to footnote. Nobody's like, let's really dig in the weeds and retell that Lord of the Rings tale that was made 15 years ago.
So here's my counterpoint to that, which is, in my opinion, top 3 TV shows in history is Breaking Bad. You knew from the minute because Vince Gilligan had said this is going to be a tale of descent into darkness. We know Walter White is going to end up being terrible and a horrible
He's going to go from the protagonist to the villain
to Scarface, essentially. I think is what he said.
You're goddamn right.
Knowing that show was still amazing as we watch his descent into that character. So what Jay touched on, which is if it's towards that end of the Second Age, the rings are handed out, and we see what is this glorious civilization, and we see these people that maybe there's some backstory on that we care about, and we learn about them, and then we watch their descent into darkness, essentially, into these ring wraiths, and we see kind of the society crumble as an outpouring of that. That could be an interesting story.
Also, to follow up with your analogy of Breaking Bad and looking at source material, Better Call Saul is one of the best examples of a prequel that is nearly as good as the original.
If not better.
If not better.
And that story arc is the same. It's someone who you start really, really caring for and liking, and then you watch him turn into something.
Yeah, so
like.
it's
something spectacular.
I think the other thing to think about is that while the Silmarillion is really not a pleasant read, and it's very boring, they're not going to be playing that out word for word on the screen. It's going to be diving into things that aren't in the Silmarillion, right? It's expanding that world and those characters and finding out who the characters are. And it's really going to come down to, is the writing good? Is the story compelling? And the whole background that it's Lord of the Rings just gives people that already have an interest in that property an interest to
Gives
go to the
them name
show.
recognition,
The question
right.
is, can they take what little pieces of information we have about the Second Age and about this theme of the fall of men or the rise of evil, whichever one it is, and create interesting characters with good writers and story arcs, smaller story arcs that we like, and good actors. And no question, they will have good writers, good producers, and good actors.
Here's what I want to see. I want to see the love story of Tom Bombadil and what's his lady's name?
I don't know.
Flower Princess, whatever.
Goldberry. Goldberry?
Goldberry.
Is
Tom Bombadil and Goldberry.
It is
It's a
Goldberry,
love
right?
story, romantic comedy set in the Lord of the Rings. So
My fear is that they're not going to have a set end goal. If they have a set end goal where we are going to start here, it is going to be 4 exact seasons, and the end result will be the corruption of man and falling to the rings. Instead of, I think they're going to sit here and go, give, Bessie, give!
the
My
Walking
baby's
Dead
gotta
approach.
live. Yeah, they're going to
It's
have the
gonna go
Walking
as long
Dead
as
approach
possible.
of this just wandering, meandering, because there's a lot of material they can play with. And so are they going to tell us a tight, well-made story, or are they going to be like, we really need to maximize our investment?
We spent $1 billion on this.
I think the answer to that is Jeff Bezos said, find me my Game of Thrones. And if they're trying to follow that model of 10 episode seasons that go for 6, 7, 8 seasons, that's what we're going to get.
Well, and we know Jeff Bezos listens to this podcast.
Yeah.
So, Jeff, take it to heart. Tight story. Have an end goal.
FAB, lock it up.
Have an end point in mind before you start filming. So, with that, we are the Sons of Morthraken. Thank you for listening. Catch you later.
Like, subscribe, leave mean comments.
They know how YouTube
we
works.
We don't really care.